Great, I'm waiting for the gift. And a day goes by and I don't feel any better. 2 days go by, I feel worse. 3 days go by and I want to kill myself. And I made an appointment with my sponsor and I met with him. I said, fifth step? And he goes, yeah. I go, I think we did it wrong. And he said, what makes you think we did it wrong? I said, buddy, let me tell you something. I've never felt so filthy and dirty and disgusting in my life. And he thought about it and he goes, well, Don, I was there for your fifth step. And you should feel filthy and dirty and disgusting. And this is what I know about the fifth step today. Very important that we get it done. But here's one of the dangers of the fifth step. Feels important, doesn't it? Wow, I did my inventory. Wow, look at me, I did my inventory. But we're in the process of steps 4 through 9 of turning our will and life over to the care of God. We can't stop there, but it feels important, and a lot of people stall out after their fifth step. A lot of people. But what do we really have when we're done with our fifth step? Page 39 in the big book says, for the real alcoholic, he will absolutely be unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And what you have when you're done with your fifth step is nitroglycerin. You have the purest form of self-knowledge you've ever experienced. No justification, no rationalization, no explaining away. You know yourself on a deeper level than you've ever known yourself, and it feels powerful. But we haven't done anything with it. My sponsor said that I'll probably get relief in steps 8 and 9 like most of us do. Sheldon?
You know what I really love? Doing these workshops with Don, we've gotten to do a few of them together. And I'm always writing notes when he's sharing, all right? So I got to finish my note here. Because sometimes he says stuff that he'll never say it again because he just, it wasn't of him. So if I don't write it down, I could be with him for another 10 times and he'll never say that again. So I got to write that down. I'm just kidding. So this idea of fear and how much it owns me and how much it drives me, on page 65 on that 3-column diagram that Bill puts in the book, at the end of the 3rd column where it talks about what's affected, fear is in parentheses down the side. On the next page it says, what about fear? It's bracketed alongside the names of Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones, and the employer. When I come out of my resentment inventory, the one thing that I should probably have learned, hopefully, or the one thing that I was able to glean from my resentments is that I thought I was angry. That's what I thought. I thought I was angry at all these people. But really it turns out what I was is I was afraid. That self-centered fear is the thing that drives me. Self-centered fear is the thing that owns me. Self-centered fear is the thing that I'm constantly reacting to. That you can write a list of 100 different character defects, and some people do. Sometimes if you go to an open discussion meeting and they ask for a topic, bring up the topic character defects and see how many different things come up, right? Oh, I'm greedy and I'm lustful and I'm angry and I'm spiteful and I'm a liar and I'm a glutton and I'm this and I'm that. But really what I really am, underneath all of it, is I am simply afraid. I simply feel like I'm not enough. I feel like if you knew about me the things you knew about me, you would think about me the way I think about me. And then we could finally both agree that I ain't worth much. And fear is the thing that drives me. And when we write this inventory, this fear inventory, on the top of page 68, it says that we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Why am I afraid? What is it that makes me so squirmy and uncomfortable, feeling so vulnerable, feeling like I'm not enough, feeling like I can't succeed, feeling like I'm always going to fail, feeling like I'm always going to let people down, feeling like I'm always going to make the wrong decision, feeling like people are threatening me. What is it that makes me feel that way? And I love this next line. It says, wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? I've lived a life based on self. I've lived a life where all I have really concerned myself with is how I feel, what's happening for me, if I've got enough, if I'm being treated correctly, if you respect me enough, if you care about me deeply enough. I've lived my life based on trying to do everything I can to make myself feel good. And what have I done? How have I acted? I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. Well, let's look at self-reliance. Let's look at how I've lived my work life to this point. Aren't I the guy that shows up late? Aren't I the guy that tries to leave early? Aren't I the guy that's been stealing copier paper for the last 6 months? Aren't I the guy that's talking behind my boss's back with all the other employees about how they're doing everything wrong? Aren't I the guy that's really not doing a good job at work? And maybe I'm doing a good job at my current job. Maybe that was before, I'm sober now and I'm living a cleaner life. But when I look at my last 10 jobs, what kind of an employee have I been? Based on my track record, shouldn't I probably be afraid? I'm afraid she's going to leave. I'm afraid she's going to leave. Well, how am I treating her? How do I show up in the relationship? Am I respectful or am I judgmental? Do I snap? Do I yell? Do I demand more than I'm entitled to? Or do I expect her to behave in ways she can't behave? Am I unfaithful? Am I dishonest? Am I a liar? Based on my track record of my last 10 relationships, shouldn't I be afraid? When I look at the way that I've lived my life without God, when I look at the way I've lived my life based on self, when I look at how I show up in situations, isn't the evidence of my life that I should be afraid? I love this thing that Don said. It made me laugh when he said he looks at his 7 major relationships and he's 0 for 7, right? I love that. I started thinking to myself, what do we say in AA? Like when we're talking amongst ourselves, what do we say about our relationships? We're not that honest. We say, what's my real problem? You know what my real problem is in relationships? I have a bad picker, right? Right? Like Don's problem with his 0 and 7 is he picked the wrong 7 people, right? Right? I mean, aren't I that screwed up that that's really what I think? The problem is the truth is that Don met 7 wonderful people. And after they'd spent time with him, they became the devil themselves, right? Because that's the effect Don has on people, right? Right? And isn't that the truth about me in my life? That my self-centered fear, my desperate demand of people to make me feel in ways that it is unreasonable for me to make them feel, whether it's my parents, my friends, my family, the people at the home group, the people I work with, or the people that I'm in a relationship with. Isn't it that my empty, squirmy fear, my demand for satisfaction from other people turns me into this guy that gets the dream job and 6 months later can't believe I work at a place like this? Gets the dream girl, and 6 months later, I can't believe I'm stuck with this crazy lunatic, right? Goes to the home group, and 6 months later, I want a business meeting because there's things we're just not doing right here. That my emptiness drives me to this. Fear is the thing that is the cause of most of the problems in my life. If resentment is the machine that destroys my life, fear is the fuel that I put in that machine to make that machine operate. There is AA folklore that I understand where it comes from, but it doesn't feel right for me. And it might feel right for you, but it doesn't feel right for me. This idea that if I can find a connection to God, I'll no longer be afraid. There's a joke that used to go around that people would share in meetings. They'd say, when fear knocks at the door, if faith answers, there's nobody there, right? Which would make me feel like I'm doing something wrong. Because I think I got a pretty decent dose of faith. I mean, I'm no I don't need a tambourine. We're not pitching a tent nowhere. But I kind of dig God, and I think he digs me, and I trust him. I think he's got my back. I mean, it seems like the evidence of my life is that God's on my side, and I believe that everything's going to work out if I take the right action. I got a lot of faith. I have I don't have self-reliance. I got some God confidence. I really do. The experience of the last 21 years of my life is that God's on my side, and it's going to be okay. And I know that because it's always been okay. But I get afraid. I do. And if the question is, if you're afraid, what's the solution? And the solution is faith. And if you have faith, fear disappears. Then I must be doing something wrong. Because with all the faith that I have, I am often afraid. I'm often driven to take actions that I wish I wouldn't have taken. I'm often locked up in my own head. I just get that way. So what does faith do for a guy like me then if it doesn't remove the fear? And I love this line at the end of the narrative on 68. It says, all men of faith have courage. They trust their God. They have courage. Well, what does courage mean? If the gift of faith is courage, it's not the absence of fear. Because if I wasn't afraid, I wouldn't need courage. Courage is a tool that scared men and women use to take the right action, not because they have no fear, but in spite of their fear. That my faith and trust in God allows me to do the right thing most of the time, scared to death. That scared to death, I can have the courage to take the right action. And it was such a relief for me to learn that that's what is going on for me. Because otherwise I start to second guess my relationship with God. If God loves me and I love God, I shouldn't be afraid. Well, I tell you, I'm afraid all the time. I started a new business a year ago, and boy, it's growing at a slow pace, not as quick as I need it to, boy. All right, I'm afraid of what my financial future is going to look like. I had an interesting thing. Some of you know this. I almost didn't make it this weekend. A week ago, I caught one of my top managers stealing from me, which is scary stuff in a business that's not really doing as well as it should. And now I'm afraid. I call Jody. I tell Jody, I'm afraid to leave my business. I don't think I can come. I can't leave it unattended. I got to be there. I got to do my job, right? I got to be there for the company. And until, I think, Thursday, I finally said, okay, I'll come, right? And scared to death, I sent Jody a text, and my text just said this: clean house, trust God, go to Alabama. And because I got to act like a guy that trusts God. The trick for me is not to wait until I'm not afraid. It's to act like God's on my side even though I'm afraid. And then God shows up. God shows up. And that seems to be my experience. Sexual imagery is the place in my life where if you were to say that the problem that I have is resentment and anger that is fired by self-centered fear. It is true that you can find that in my work life. It is true you can find that in my family life. It is true you can find that in my platonic relationships. But boy, somehow you get me in a sexual relationship, and it is at that point where the resentment and the fear and all the squirmy emotions, there's more, it seems like there's more at risk. So I think Bill has me do this sexual imagery because it is such a magical place for me to really look at all the things in my life, all the areas of self, all the places where I am driven. And it is the place in my life that we don't want to talk about. It's the place that we keep in the dark. What's that old joke, right? That sex is something that is beautiful and mystical and magical that you only do with someone that you love in the dark when nobody's watching, all right? Because we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. And we all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. It is where I am the most vulnerable and the most afraid. And what a great place for me to examine my selfishness and my judgment, and when I'm creating jealousy and suspicion and the like, and we're all a mess in this area. I tell you, it's a crazy, crazy thing that we do sometimes. We come to AA and we ask broken people, right? The one area of our lives where we're the biggest mess, we ask each other for advice. And I love this hysterical thinking or advice. I am so sure what you should do in every area of your life, and so ashamed and confused about what I should do in every area of my life. But I think the key to all of this leads us right into step 5. That in every area of my life, whether it's resentment or fear, my sexual conduct or misconduct, that I am transparent with someone. Not with everyone, right? I don't recommend anybody writes their 4th step and then shares their 5th step next time they're asked to talk, right? I'm glad we're all here together. I'm going to tell you all my dark secrets. But there is somebody in my life, one person in my life. My sponsor, some of you know my sponsor. My sponsor is Bob D. from Las Vegas. And there is absolutely nothing about my life that Bob doesn't know. And I got a couple of other close friends in my life that are like that. Don is one of those men. There is nothing about my life that Don doesn't know. Because I think that for me to feel whole and connected with God, there has to be another person that I'm able to look in the eye and that knows all of that stuff about me. And that knows and understands the things that are driving me, the fears, the regrets, the angst, the shame, the guilt, the remorse, all of that stuff. All of that stuff. Over on page 73, it talks about taking inventory. Or at the bottom of 72, it says, time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory, all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egotism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they'd not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty. In a sense, we find it necessary until they told someone their whole life story. One of the emotions, one of the feelings, one of the things about me when I was new to Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't really know until you said it and you put a name on it, and the minute you said it and you put a name on it, I knew it was true. I felt separate. I felt this loneliness, this difference, this anxious apartness that 12 and 12 talks about that made me feel like I didn't really fit in this world. And because I felt separate and because I felt alone and because I felt this anxious apartness, I had to try and figure out why, and I did it through judgment of you. I had to constantly be looking at why we were different. What is it about us? What are you doing wrong? What are you doing right? Are you better than me? Are you worse than me? Never are you the same as me. Because I had to try and figure out what it was that kept me so alone from you. And through step 5, through examining what it is about me, not that what is different, but in this 4-step journey of this was our course, what I think is so important in the inventory, of finding out how I'm like you. One definition of humility is realizing that I am no different than you, that we are the same, and that learning this sameness between us is the thing that ends separation. That learning how I'm like you, removing the smoke and the darkness and the fog from the room that separates me from you, but learning how we are together, how we're joined in this journey, is the thing that reduces the separation. And if I can't reduce the separation between you and me, I'll never reduce the separation between me and God. There's that old American Indian poem, right, that says, I sought my God and he eluded me. I sought myself, I could not see. I sought my brother and there I found all three. And it is by realizing how we are alike, how we are the same, in this journey of step 4 and 5, that I become the one thing that I so desperately need. I become part of you again. I'm this guy, the book says, that likes to live the double life, that I think I need to be more than I am because I don't feel like I'm enough, because I feel like somehow I don't measure up. Then I have to create this character of who I think you need me to be. This lie, this story about Sheldon that is enough. And then I spend my life trying to prop it up. Like there's a guy in my home group that talks about this. He was popular in the 80s and 90s, these guys with the poles with the plate on top. And they'd spin the plate, right? And they got to run from pole to pole and keep the plate spinning. And if a plate ever slows down, it teeters and falls off the pole. And I'm the guy that's running around my life trying to prop up the story, trying to keep the plate spinning. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So I write all this stuff down and I go to share this stuff. And who do I share this stuff with? I don't. So I'm born into a Jewish home. And in the Jewish faith, we have a way that we're supposed to deal with this stuff. My wife is a Catholic girl. And in the Catholic faith, there's a way that you're supposed to deal with this stuff. In the Catholic faith, the goal, from what I understand, and if you're Catholic and I say this wrong, believe me, it's just because I don't know and I'm talking about stuff I don't know, which is not unlike me, you have to know. I'm a guy that gets 10% of the information and makes up the rest. It's just the story of my life. But in the Catholic faith, you go to confession, you go sit with a priest, and you share the stuff with the priest, and it's a beautiful thing to do. In our big book, it says that there are three things that this person should be. They should be closed-mouthed. Right? They should be closed-mouthed. They should be understanding. And they should not try to change our plan. So in the Catholic faith, there's some amazing priests that are AA-friendly that you could share an inventory with. And they would be closed-mouthed. They would never say anything, and that's valuable. And they would be understanding. I mean, they're men of the cloth. Most clergy are very compassionate, kind people. They would be understanding. And because they're AA informed, they wouldn't try to change your plan. But if they weren't AA informed, they might say, well, then you can say these prayers, you can do these rituals, and then you don't have to worry about steps 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, because God loves you, you're forgiven, don't worry about it. In the Jewish faith, once a year, because now Catholics, I think you're supposed to do confession regularly, right? How often are you supposed to do confession? Any Catholics? Every week. See, Jews, we don't pay retail. We do everything wholesale. So we only do it once a year. First of all, we're not as bad as you, so we... But once a year between New Year and the Day of Atonement, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we're supposed to contemplate all of our sins and think about the wrongs that we've done. And then the story goes that at Yom Kippur, we do the one thing that Jews never do, which is we don't eat. We fast for a day. And then we take some bread and we say some prayers over the bread. And then we sprinkle the bread and we put the sins in the bread, is what we do. And then we go to a stream or a river and we sprinkle the sin-laden bread in the stream or the river, and the stream takes it away. And then we are forgiven. Now, the weird thing about that is that the home of Judaism, of course, is Israel, which is a desert where there aren't a lot of streams or rivers. So they came up with another way of doing it, where what you actually do now is you get a sacrificial goat, and you say the prayers over the bread, and then you sprinkle the bread into the goat's fleece, and then you spank the goat on the ass, and the goat runs out of the village, and you are forgiven. Unless one of your sins is spanking goats' asses, and then you're in this terrible cycle that is never ending. Never ending. Yeah, you're a goat spanker, Landis. There's nothing we can do about it. But very, very quickly, these three things that are vital. And this is this is more of a conversation, not for a guy who's getting ready to share his fifth step, but let's have a conversation about the guy that's getting, or the gal that's getting ready to hear a fifth step. Because all joking aside and all humor aside, this closed-mouthed friend, Dr. Bob talked about that evil member of the tongue, the gossip that we do in AA, the talking about each other. So, we temper it with kindness and love, the 12 and 12 says. Here's the problem with gossip in AA. I'm getting ready to share my fifth step with you. And I hear you after the meeting talking about somebody that's not there. Oh, old Bill, I think he's cheating on at work again. He's beating on his kids. I think he was flirting with that girl, that's inappropriate. And we gossip a little bit about each other. Or even worse, I'm sponsoring a guy and I'm sponsoring you. And I talk to you about the other guy that I'm sponsoring. I kind of hint her. I'm smarter than to outright tell you, but I hint around a little bit about something you've said. The danger with that is that now I need to share something secret. We laugh that you're as sick as your secrets. There are things in my life sometimes that require to be kept in a confidence. There just are. And if I was afraid that my sponsor might share that confidence, I wouldn't be able to share my stuff with him. That if I can't trust the person I'm giving my fifth step to or my 10th step to, or that I'm sharing my life with, I might hold back. And it warns earlier on in the book here, it says that if I don't share everything, I might drink again. And so we have a responsibility as AA members. We have a responsibility not to gossip. So when people come to us to share things, they will share openly and completely with us. I need to be a closed-mouthed friend. What else do I need to be? I need to be an understanding friend. Boy, I went through a phase about 4 or 5 years sober. Or if you came to me with stuff, I was the poke you in the chest guy. Well, you shouldn't do that, kid. That's wrong. You should know better. Should behave better. What's the matter with you? You can't behave that way. Very judgmental. I hope I have learned, and I really hope I continue to learn more about compassion in Alcoholics Anonymous. That my goal is not only to be closed-mouthed, but when guys come to me, to be able to be loving and kind and understanding, to make them feel comfortable and safe. Isn't that what I really need out of a sponsor? A safe place to go. A safe place to go. There's a big difference between sharing everything in a fifth step and sharing everything but one or two things. And there is a responsibility on both sides of this equation. And one responsibility is on the guy sharing his fifth step, that he be prepared to share everything. And the other responsibility is on the person hearing the fifth step, that he present himself or herself in a way where they're closed-mouthed and understanding, and they allow that person the honor of being able to share everything with them. But I agree with what Don said, that there is a great relief that comes from step 5, but it is temporary. I like to think of it as if I'm doing my laundry, right? Which I don't do very often. My wife tells me about the experience of doing laundry, so this is really her. I'm kidding. Don't roll your eyes at me, I'm kidding. But when you do laundry, if you've got a pile of dirty, stinky clothes, and if you think about my life as a pile of dirty, stinky clothes, and I take them and I put them in the washing machine, and I put some of that fancy smelling soap in there, right? And I wash the clothes. When they're done washing, which is like step 4 and 5 is like the wash cycle. When they're done washing, right? If you open up the washing machine, they look brighter, they smell cleaner, right? We're getting there, aren't we? But if I close the washing machine door and I just let them sitting there, what's going to happen? They're going to get worse. They're going to be stinkier and moldy and dirty and worse. I would rather put on a dirty shirt than a shirt that sat in the washing machine for a week, wouldn't you? Right? So what do I do next? I take them out of the washing machine and I either put them in the dryer, or maybe I don't, does anybody hang them on the clothesline anymore? Maybe I hang them on the clothesline, right? But I got to go through the drying cycle in order to make those clothes clean and fresh and wearable. And that's what 6, 7, 8, and 9 are. They're the drying cycle. It's completing the wash. And that's why this danger of people stalling at step 5, it does make us worse. You can get sicker if you do 5 and stop. And there are people sober a long time. And I'll tell you this, and we'll take a break, and this, maybe you know people like this. I hope it's not your experience, but it may be. I have people come to me often that are sober a long time that want help. And they're sober and they're not drinking, but they're frustrated and their lives aren't what it needs to be. And I will tell you the first question I ask them, right after I ask them, how many new people are you working with? The first question I ask them is, did you stop at 5? Do you have unmade amends? Are there amends that you should have made that you haven't yet? And I tell you, every time it's getting through 5 and thinking that, oh, okay, I'm done now, and not moving on with the rest of the stuff that causes the problem. It is right at 11. Let's take a break till 10 after. I like to joke about, I make this little comment from time to time when I tell my story, this idea that step 6 and 7, nobody really understands 6 and 7. If you go to an open discussion meeting and you'll hear people talk about 6 and 7, you'll hear invariably someone will say, you know, gosh, there really isn't much written about step 6 and 7. There really isn't much there. I mean, gosh, Bill only wrote 1 paragraph on 6 and then 1 paragraph on 7, and most of the paragraph on step 7 is just a prayer. There really isn't much to it. And my experience was kind of like that. I came out of my 5th step and my sponsor said, okay, go home and be quiet for an hour. And when he said that, I knew he meant 3.5 minutes. Think about what I'd done with the first 5 steps. Was it real? It was great. Say the prayer, move on, and I'm done with step 6. I'm done with step 7. Let's get on about the business of making amends. I was about 3 or 4 years sober, and things were bad at work. I got this boss that I know doesn't like me, and I know he's trying to find a way to fire me. I sense it every time I walk into work. I know that this guy is like nitpicking, and he's looking at everything I do, and he's second-guessing everything. And I'm in management, and I'm supposed to be able to make decisions, but I'm afraid to make a decision because I know that whatever I decide, whether I go this way or that way, it doesn't matter. He's going to have an opinion about it, and I just feel uncomfortable. And I'm trying to manage people, and I know they don't really respect me, and I know that they're, you know, the only tool that I have, the only way I have to get them in line is through fear and domination, because I know that they all think that they could have my job and they could do a better job than me. And my customers are always, you know, they're just not grateful. You'd think they'd be grateful, but they're not grateful. They're always asking and demanding more from me, and it's just so difficult. And work is just on my ass, and that would be okay if that was the only problem. But I tell you, home isn't great either, right? When I get home, I'm tired and I don't really want to think. You know, I work with the public, and the public are very demanding. And when I get home, here's what I want to do. I want to sit down in my chair and I want to stare at CNN. That's all I want to do. I don't want to talk to anybody about anything. And she doesn't understand. She just wants to come at me and ask me difficult questions like, how was your day? You know? And she wants to tell me about stuff I don't care about, like how her day was. What I really wanted to do is to put some food on a plate and sit and just be quiet, right? And my kid, play with me, talk to me, do stuff with me, right? He's making a noise and he's breaking stuff, and he's and my home group, if Mr. Grateful shares one more time. I was at the meeting last night, the night before, last week, the week before, last month, and last year. And you have said the same thing over and over again, like my mother-in-law's parrot, right? You quote the same goddamn page. You learn something new. And I'm driving to my sponsor's house, and the guy that is in the car in front of me, now, this is a nice car. I know this car does more than 35 miles an hour. I'm certain of it. And I get to my sponsor's house, and I'm completely crazy. And I must have had this look on my face of just like, ah. And he opens the door, and he goes, oh, my God, I know that look. That's the Sheldon can't manage his own life look. You better come inside. And we sit, and I tell him what's going on, and I tell him about the job, and I tell him about my wife, and I tell him about the guys in my home group, and I tell him about the people in traffic, and I tell him about just how difficult life is. And he says, you know, you got a step 6 problem. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm paying my amends. I'm on step 9. I'm done with step 6, which he thought was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And he started to explain to me that step 6 for him, and how actively he was involved in step 6, and what step 6 meant, and what step 6 was trying to teach, was the very essence of his sobriety. That to the extent that he was able to live in step 6 was to the extent at which he was allowing God in his life. And that step 6 was this journey that really is what AA is all about. I walk through this world with this self-centered fear, with this judgment, with this squirmy, incomplete, uncomfortable feeling. And I bring it to everything that I do. And I am constantly looking for things to take that away. I'm looking for attention and applause from my boss. I'm looking for attention and applause in my home group. I'm looking for attention and applause from my wife, and if I can't get it there, I'm looking for attention and applause in other places that I shouldn't be looking. I'm looking for something to make me feel whole and make me feel complete, because I think there is something wrong with me. Because I feel incomplete, because I feel broken, I think there is something wrong with me. There is nothing wrong with me. As our friend Bob Bazant says, I am come from the manufacturer, incomplete. I show up in this world broken. There's some beautiful literature it's not AA approved, and it doesn't care. Beautiful spiritual literature that says things like, everything that God made, he made magically broken. That what is wrong with me is that I am imperfectly human. I am human, and that my humanness is a longing, it is a brokenness, it is a seeking, it is an emptiness, and that there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is that the human condition, as I have learned, and I think is absolutely true, is that if there is something wrong, I demand to fix it. And I am trying to fix this human spirit that is designed the way it is designed, hungry for connectedness, hungry for unity. Why does Bill not write much about step 6 in the big book? Perhaps the entire big book is about step 6. Perhaps everything that is written up to page 76 and everything that is written after page 76 is designed to help me notice that what is lacking in me is a void, a spiritual emptiness, that my design, my purpose, the very reason that I am here on this planet is to find this journey back to the power, to find a connectedness to God. When I was new and we talked about step 3, they would say things that, they were annoying and infuriating. One of my favorite things that they would say is I would say, I can't turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And some old timer would say, oh, it's just a decision. We don't really do anything in step 3, it's just a decision. If 3 frogs were on a log and one of them decided to jump off, how many frogs would be on the log? And I want to say, well, 2. No, Punky. Still 3, it was only a decision. Maybe in step 6, the frog actually jumps off the log. Maybe in step 6, maybe the journey of step 6 is that when I feel these squirmy, empty, lonely, insignificant, unsecured, vulnerable, needy feelings, that I'm trying to throw money and jobs and sex and food and shopping and vacations and all this outside stuff at. Maybe the very essence of the journey is that I'm supposed to now be willing to turn this stuff over to God. I walk through this world, and I've heard it said, and I think it's a beautiful analogy, as if there is a magnet inside of me. And this magnet attracts problems. It looks for and attracts problems. And so I go through this world, and it's like this hunk of metal sticks to me called work and work problems, and it weighs me down. Problems in my relationships, and it weighs me down. Money problems, and it weighs me down. Problems with how I think you think about me, and it weighs me down. Judgment of the things that you're doing and the things that you should be doing differently, and it weighs me down. And it makes my spirit and my soul feel heavy. It snuffs out the light. It makes me feel like the world and its people are against me. It makes it hard for me to breathe. And worse, what I do then is I take the hunks of metal, and like a blacksmith on an anvil with a hammer, I turn these hunks of metal into a shield, into a wall that separate me and block me from you. And I put these things between you and me so I feel like I can be safe and protected. The problem with the wall is that now I'm alone behind the wall. Now I feel the separation, the anxious apartness. I create it with my judgment and my fear. I just wish that some of the stories of old were true, and that there was some kind of a spell, maybe a magic potion that I could drink that would turn the magnet off and stop me from reacting in the world that way. And then it occurs to me, there is whiskey. It turns off the judgment machine. It eliminates the separation until it doesn't, until it stops working. And then in a state of abstinence, alone and afraid, behind the wall, separate from you by my judgment and my opinions, by my fear and my squirmy emptiness, I find myself locked, stuck, alone, afraid. So I go through the steps, and I start to get a sense of connectedness. But inside me, there is this longing question that I want to ask God. I want to say to him, Pops, let me ask you something, because this, and I'm a little upset, right? Because God is God, and God can do anything, and God has that kind of power, and God could remove all of this from me. He could, I know it, because he's God. Ultimate power. Makes the trees, the sunrise, sunset, flowers, smells and sights and sunsets. I mean, God can do anything. God could render me to where I don't feel these squirmy feelings anymore. And you know what? You tell me that he is the Father and I am the Son. Well, I have a son. And if there was anything that I could do for my son, I would. I would make my son's life easier in a heartbeat. If it was possible for me to remove from him all the angst, all the uncomfortability, I would do it now. I love my son, and if God loves me, you'd think he'd do that for me too. And I got to tell you, I'm a little mad that he doesn't, right? I mean, you're right. If he loved me, he would. He could, right? Maybe he doesn't. Like, there are people in meetings that I don't believe them anymore, but I used to believe them. They act like, oh, right? And they want you to believe that he's done it for them. Why won't he do it for me? Why do I have to struggle and suffer this way? And I tell you, I have come to an understanding that is right for me, and it might not be right for you, but it is right for me. That the greatest gift that God ever gave me is my struggle. That the greatest gift that God gives me is my squirmy, insecure, self-centered fear. That the greatest gift that God ever gave me is my feeling of separation and aloneness. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because I know me. And if I woke up tomorrow morning with no more fear, if I woke up tomorrow morning with no more judgment, if I woke up tomorrow morning no longer feeling alone, I would wake up tomorrow morning with no reason to pray. I would wake up tomorrow morning with no reason to seek God. I would wake up tomorrow morning self-sufficient. And I've been going through some stuff in my life over this last year. It's been a really interesting year in business and other areas of my life. And I have prayed more in this last year than I did the year before. That all of these things that I wish did not exist in my life have driven me closer to God, not further away. And I'm blessed for that, because there are times in my life where it may have driven me further away. But what is the action of step 6? What is the willingness that I need to have? It is the willingness that in the middle of the storm that I stop and I ask God for his help. That in the middle of the chaos, that I remember that the answer isn't for the absence of chaos, but is for the peace of knowing that God is with me in the chaos. That the magic of step 6 is the unity that God can give me in the middle of the desperation. And that without the desperation, without the hardship, without the fear, without the confusion, without the bad decisions, without the self-inflicted madness in my life, that I would have no reason to go to God. That what Alcoholics Anonymous is at its core is a program in which we remind each other that there is only one problem, as Chuck Chamberlain would say. And that problem is conscious separation from God. And that encompasses all problems, and that all difficulties, and all of the struggles that I have at their end, at their core, at their bottom, where they begin and where they end, is that conscious separation from God. And if that is true, then there is only one solution, and there is only one answer, and that is conscious connectedness to God. That every problem, every insecurity, every squirmy feeling, every bad action, everything I regret and am ashamed of, that every one of those things can be solved with a conscious connectedness to God. I want to read a little something that I found, and Don and I were talking at the break, and he was telling me, with a little chagrin, he was almost a little embarrassed that he was telling me this, that he'd found this thing he shared with me, not what I'm going to read, but a different thing, that he'd found it in all places. He'd found it on Facebook. And I want you to know that I found this particular reading on Facebook. But this is what it says. And this is a lesson from the Buddhist tradition. So a Jew is going to talk to a mostly Christian crowd about a Buddhist lesson. I love AA. I love AA. But it says in the Buddhist tradition, difficulties are considered to be so important to a life of growth and peace that a Tibetan prayer actually asks God for them. It says, grant that I may be given appropriate difficulties and suffering on this journey, that my heart may be truly awakened, and my practice of liberation and universal compassion may be truly fulfilled. It is felt that when a life is too easy, there are fewer opportunities for genuine growth. And then it ends with no mud, no lotus. Without the manure, the flowers can't grow. So I have to be grateful for the manure, as much as I don't like the smell of my own manure. I have to be grateful for it. In step 7, it says, we say something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Why would I want to give God good and bad? Why wouldn't I just want to give him bad? If I've learned anything about me, it's that I don't know what's good and what's bad. When I was new, Don talked about this the other day. He said, geez, pick someone that's got what you want, and when you're new, right, what do you want? If I think hookers and crack are a good idea, right? I'm that guy, right? I don't know what's good and bad. God, take what's good, take it all, Pops. Take it all. I offer that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. Not every single defect of character, but only the ones that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I have a character defect that causes me more pain and more problems than just about anything else on a consistent basis. I say inappropriate stuff at the wrong time. I can't keep my mouth shut. And I wish God would take that from me. But he seems to find it useful on a Saturday morning in Alabama, so he lets me keep it. But Pops, could you at least temper it a little bit when I get home on Monday? Could you at least let me keep my mouth shut a little bit, right? Remove every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. If I walked in here and you guys were pure as the driven snow, who would I identify with? If I walked in here and you were problem-free, to whom would I bring my problems? If I walked in here and you were self-confident and you were at peace, who would I bring my insecurity and my chaos to? Wilson says that we are joined together not by our virtue, but by our difficulty. I can't help it. Something good happens for you, and I'm a little happy for you and mostly jealous. It's just the way I'm wired. Right? Oh, you got a new car? That's nice. I want a new car. Right? But in your struggles and in your pain, it is how I find connectedness and unity to you. So God allows us to be pure enough and happy enough and stable enough to stay sober, and broken enough and human enough to allow us to be connected. And it is the connectedness that I crave. It is being joined to you through your defects and through my defects that I truly crave. Grant me strength as I go out from here, where I'm locked, to do your bidding, to join the world, out from the prison I create with my judgment, my squirminess, and my insecurity. Then the 7-step prayer ends with a simple amen, which is worth noting because the 3rd step had no amen. It seems like we've been on this journey of prayer from 3 through 7, of trying to become comfortable and honest about my insecurity and my flaws in my character, so I can become compassionate and caring about your insecurity, and compassionate and caring and forgiving of your flaws and your insecurity, so I can do the one thing that I've craved, so I can find unity, connectedness, and allow through humility the separation to start to die. Don.
It says it right here, I judge everybody. That's weird. Non-alcoholic? So a little something that my wife and I do in our spare times. We like to go yard selling. We like to hit thrift stores, look for, bargains. And it's something that, you pick up when you're hopelessly in debt, when you get sober, and you kind of fall in love with it. And then and you hate paying retail, and you just, you look for things. And one of the things we always do when we're at the Salvation Army or the Goodwill is we'll go to the book station and try to find AA-approved literature. And I always like to rescue big books that have been discarded, and you bring them to your home group, you give them to book studies, and you donate them, you bring them into jails, you do whatever you can with them. And what I like to do is get a big book, and then what I like to do is open it up and start to judge a person that I've never met. And who's no longer in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll open the book, and usually there's a name and a sobriety date, and it's written in ink, which I always think is optimistic of us. I really do. And then I'll start going through the book, and I'll go through the prefaces, and I'll go, oh yeah, good, they underline that, good, 100 men and women, good. And I'll go into a doctor's opinion, oh good, allergy, phenomenon of craving, they got that, good. A little note in the margin, good, twofold disease, good. And Bill's story, and I'm watching, and as I go through the book, I'm looking at their notes, I'm looking at their highlighting. And there's something I've noticed over the years, I've been doing this for a long time, is the book usually will be highlighted, notes, and I'm judging perfect. And usually right after the fifth step, the rest of the book, not a mark in it. And and I talked about desperation being the propellant that takes us through the steps, and that's a physical representation. I can look in somebody's big book that's now in Goodwill or the Salvation Army, and I could see the exact moment they ran out of their desperation, when they stalled in the steps. And quite often it's right after the fifth step. And why is that? And I think it's because of the emphasis we talk in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous so much about. We put so much emphasis on it, about doing our inventory and getting it done, that it leads somebody to believe that when they're done with it, they've completed something that they never have to look at again. And everything that we're going to examine this weekend is really the steps in the beginning. When we first go through them, are very compartmentalized. They feel compartmentalized. You ask any good newcomer, hey, what step are you on, kid? Step 3, sir. What step are you on? I'm on my 9th step. I'm about to do my 9th step. Somebody spot me. Oh, it's kind of heavy, It's a spiritual burn. But what happens is we go through the steps repeatedly as they're designed to be gone through. It's almost like the loving hand of God reaches down and starts pulling out the compartments that are between the steps. And what's revealed at the end of that process is what the big book refers to in 3 different spots as a design for living. How we're going to work out the solution to our life, these spiritual principles that we're going to put to play in our life. So I think it's very important when we're done with our fifth step that we don't delay. And so now we're going to look at steps 6 and 7. And I'm going to take things that I've acquired, and the first 5 steps are going to be very important as I go into steps 6 and 7. One of the most important things is this principle of powerlessness. Now, when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and in the first step I'm introduced that I'm powerless over alcohol, I don't have an argument with that. I have enough information that tells me I agree with that. But as I go through the steps, in the second step, it tells me lack of power is my dilemma. And I look at the way I've lived my life and my inability to change anything about it, and I start to understand that this idea of powerlessness goes a lot further than just with my drinking. And then in the third step, when I realize that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, and it tells me I have to be rid of this selfishness, I must or it kills me, it says there's no way of getting entirely rid of self without God's help, nor could I reduce it much wishing on my own power. So I'm seeing that powerlessness again in the third step. I look at the fourth and the fifth step and all that information out there, and it's all bad news for me. But hopefully I've made that pivot, and now I'm willing to look at my life differently, my history differently. I'm beginning to see that the enemy lives in the mirror. But I can't do anything about it because I don't have the power. And so what I don't want to do when I go into 6 and 7 is fall victim to the old belief that this is my responsibility and my job. I don't have the power to do anything about my character defects. Yet I'm going to try. Because by this time in the process, unfortunately, for a guy like me, my ego's been resurrected. And somehow, not from my sponsor telling me, not from the literature telling me, not from anybody in AA telling me, I think this is my job. So what I'm going to come up with is a list of character defects when I'm done with my fifth step. And if you're anything like me, you're going to be very specific. You might have 127 character defects. And you're going to get up in the morning, you're going to put on your hard hat and your boots, and you're going to go out in the world and you're going to keep an eye out for those 127 character defects. And you are going to be herding cats. And it is going to be exhausting. And I got to tell you, what I believe today is I don't have 127 character defects. I don't have 15 character defects. I don't have 5 character defects. I have 1 character defect. And from this 1 character defect, all manifestations in my life that I would label negative come from this 1 character defect, the one only. I'm selfish and I'm self-centered. You know, in Bill's story on page 13, Bill says, I ruthlessly faced my sins and had my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. And when he talks about ruthlessly facing his sins, he's talking about steps 4 and 5. And when he says, I became willing, step 6, to have my newfound friend, talking about God, remove them, root and branch. Once again, there's that word root. And then when we come down into the 7th step here, or the 6th step here, it says, can he take them all, every one? So we're looking once again at this idea of root that's showing up in a couple of places. It shows up on page 13 with Bill, and then on page 62 when it talks about the root of our trouble. And for me, that's a visualization. I start thinking about my character defects. I start thinking about my character defects like a very large plant. Now, you can look at this plant, and what you're going to see is this. You're going to see a big stalk coming up out of the ground. And then a couple of feet off the ground, it's going to start branching out. There's going to be branches going out in every direction. And on these branches, it's going to be heavily leafed. There's going to be leaves, and then there's going to be buds, and there's going to be flowers. There might even be some fruit on this stuff. And there's going to be a lot going on with this. And I look at that as my character defects. Now, what I have is a couple of choices. Now, I can get out my spiritual pruning shears, and I can think this is my job. And I can go around for the rest of my sobriety, and I can start trimming these things off. Oh, I was selfish today. Oh, I was in judgment of others today. Well, I was lustful today. Oh, I was really inconsiderate today. I missed an opportunity to be helpful today. And I can walk around, and I can trim and trim and prune and prune and prune. In fact, I could get so disgusted with this bush of my character defects that I'll finally say, that's enough. I can't even take this anymore. And I'll get an axe out. And I'll chop off the stalk, and it'll fall over, and I'll haul it away. I'll throw it in the back of my truck. I'll take it down to the dump, and I'll get rid of it. And I'll go back, and I'll go, oh, I'm glad that's great. But I've done nothing about the root. And I'll turn my back for a couple of months, and I'll turn around, and that damn bush is there again. Grown up with all the branches, all the leaves, all the fruit, all the buds. I'll go, what happened? I took it down to the ground, but that's not where the problem lies. In Alcoholics Anonymous, he said alcohol is but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. When we're talking about cause and condition, we're talking about the root of the trouble. We're talking about what's underground, what we can't see, what's not easily apparent to a casual observer. Because to be free of these things, I have to go underground. I have to get to the root of the trouble. I have to get to the selfishness and self-centeredness. And here's where it gets more problematic. I don't have the power to do anything about it. But that doesn't stop me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to pray to God, I'm going to meditate, and this is what I'm going to say to myself. Go out there, Don, and don't be so damn selfish. And I'm going to think about how I look, why I think about myself not being selfish. And I'm going to think some more about myself and how you think about me as I'm not being selfish. And I'm not going to be selfish, and I'm going to do these things and hope that you notice that I'm not being selfish. Did you notice? And if you don't notice that I'm not being selfish, I might get a resentment. Oh, I got a resentment. I must be in self. So then I'm going to try to get rid of that self, and I'm going to call my sponsor, and I'm going to write an inventory. And what I'm doing is I'm working on myself. And it's not my job anymore. I think one of the reasons there's only 2 paragraphs, because the question is begged. Really, here's the question that should be. Is that really all there is to it? What if the answer is yes? What if we're going to have very little to do with the solution because the needed power isn't there? Am I going to spend the rest of my life deciding that fixing myself is now my first order of business? Or am I going to find that the inventory process that we discussed, there's a fine line between self-examination and self-obsession? Am I going to cross the line where I'm doing enough self-examination to find out the truth about the stock and trade? Or am I going to go into self-obsession, where I'm so concerned about how I'm feeling, how I'm acting, how the world's going, how you're reacting to me, that I'm no earthly good? And I've dressed it up in spiritual language and spiritual clothing, but now I'm running through Alcoholics Anonymous, obsessed with myself and how I'm feeling and how you perceive me, and am I getting well fast enough? And I think AA is a matter of subtraction rather than addition. I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I think I was born exactly the way God wanted me to be born. I think what's happened is I've acquired a lot of things that I thought I needed, that I had to make it in this world, and a lot of this stuff has to be discarded, and I don't have the power to get rid of it. I put a lot of effort into working on my character defects, and I made absolutely no progress at all. I remember when I started dating my wife, Eileen, who's, coming up on 26 years sober, good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I met Eileen, and it was interesting, Eileen is the first woman I've ever asked out on a date, which is weird because I've been engaged twice before I met her. I've lived with a bunch of different women. But I thought about it, I never actually asked anybody out on a date, because you don't date like that when you're an alcoholic. You know what I mean? You're at the bar. You look across the room and she's drinking. You look at her and she looks at you, and and next thing you know, you're renting a U-Haul. That's just how it happens. And but I met her in AA, and I had sponsor direction that I don't pull any moves without talking to my sponsor about it. So I came to him and asked him about this girl, and he knew her, and he said, "Oh, she's a good egg. You should ask her out." One of the hardest things I ever did in my life. I remember I called her up. We talked for 45 minutes about everything except going out. Never brought that up. And as we were getting off the phone, I said, "Do you think maybe perhaps sometime in the future, no pressure, you don't have to say yes or no, you don't have to do this now. I know you're really busy and probably have a full plate, but thought maybe we'd go out to dinner or something sometime." She said, "I'd love to go out to dinner." And I was hyperventilating. I got, "Okay, bye." And I just didn't make any plans, didn't set a date. I said, "Okay," click. And so we start dating, and it's hard. I mean, it is ridiculously hard. And I didn't realize this, that one of the reasons I would have never said that I was obsessive in relationships is whiskey kept me from being obsessive. It kept me from caring. If I didn't like the way I felt, I just got drunk. You weren't really real to me. You weren't really there. I never had to really deal with my feelings. Now I'm sober, and I started dating this woman, and I fell in love with her. I mean, I fell for her like a rock off the side of a boat to the bottom of the lake. I mean, it was brutal, and I didn't like it. I mean, I went out with Eileen for a couple of months, and I called my sponsor up, and I said, I called him up and asked him if I could come over and talk about my relationship, because sponsors like that. They enjoy that when you say, "Can I come over and talk about my relationship?" They say, "Sure, let me get my pistol out, I'll start cleaning it." You start talking, they go, "Go ahead, you talk." Yeah. And so I told him I wanted to break up with Eileen. And he said, a very obvious question, he said, "Well, why?" He goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, nothing, she's perfect." And he goes, "Well, why would you break up with her if she's perfect?" And I said, "Oh, I can't handle it. I'm just completely obsessed. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I like it when they're into me, not when I'm into them. This isn't working for me at all." And he called me a bad name, and he gave me direction that I couldn't break up with my girlfriend. And I said, "You can't tell me I can't break up with my girlfriend." He said, "Well, I just did." So June 30th of this year, we'll celebrate 21 years of marriage. Shows you how much I know about my life. Now, yeah. But here's me working on my character defects. So one night, we both knew each other's meeting schedules, and we weren't living together, and we went to different meetings, and we would call each other at the end of the night to check in. And I knew she was at this meeting that ended at 9:30. And she's got a cleanup commitment. She'll be done by 9:45. Then maybe she'll talk to some of her friends. It'll be 10 o'clock. She lives about 15 minutes away. She'll be home by 10:15, 10:30 at the latest. She'll probably call me around 10:30 to say goodnight. No big deal. 10:15, I'm looking at the phone. Oh, Eileen should be calling soon. No big deal. I'm really lucky to have a woman like that in my life. God, I love her. 10:30 comes. I know she's going to call any minute. I go, I'm so excited. I got so much to tell her. And God, thank you, God, for putting Eileen in my life. I'm just so lucky to have her. And 10:45 comes by. I'm a little concerned. Well, God, I hope she's okay. I hope she didn't get an offender bender or nothing. No, she's probably talking to a newcomer or something like that. Probably doing something spiritual. Thank you, God, for putting Eileen in my life. I love her so much, About 11 o'clock, she hasn't called yet. I'm like, you know what? She never loved me. And, by 11:15, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to be with someone that treats me this disrespectfully. I think it's over. At 11:30, when my phone rings, I don't answer it. Not that I'll arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. And I let it ring and ring and ring, and then it goes to the answering machine, which we used to have back in the day. And After my little entry message, I hear her say, "Hi, honey, it's me. I'm sorry I'm calling so late. I had to give this newcomer a ride home. She was really struggling. We sat in front of her house talking for like 45 minutes. I just wanted you to know I had a good day and I missed you desperately and I love you so much. Can't wait to talk to you tomorrow." Click. Ah. What the hell is wrong with me? I'm filled with guilt and shame and remorse, and I go to God and I ask His forgiveness and I tell myself, and I get an idea of what I'm going to do next time. And next time when this happens, I'm going to do this. And next time when this happens, I'm going to do that. And the next time it happens, what do? I'm sitting there at 11:30 staring at the phone, letting it ring, hating her, going to break up with her. Because I can't do anything about my character defects. I can't do anything about my jealousy. I can't do anything about my obsession. I can't do anything about my judgment. I can't do anything about my head. I don't have the power to do anything about it. But it doesn't stop me from trying, and I'm getting slaughtered out there. And I'm not making any headway, and I'm thinking maybe AA doesn't work for a guy like me because I'm getting worse. I'm not getting better in certain areas of my life. I'm 7 years sober. I'm still angry. I'm still the short fuse guy. I'm still the guy that I got to put my hands in my pockets and grip my teeth because I'm afraid I'm going to put my hands on somebody. I'm still the guy that wants to chase you down in traffic. I'm still playing that tough guy stuff. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't want to be that guy. I know it's not the way that God wants me to live, and I'm working on it. Don't you know how much I don't want to live like this? I'm 8 years sober, and I'm staring at the mirror at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I say out loud alone in my bathroom, "I'm so tired of being you." And what do you do when you hit that point, that surrender in Alcoholics Anonymous? And what happened for me is I had to re-examine step 6 and 7. And I had to look at what I was doing with that work. And what I went to my sponsor with, and I said, "I'm working so hard on 6 and 7. I'm doing everything I can. I'm aware of my character defects. I'm looking for them on a daily basis, and I'm finding them all over the place. And I'm telling myself what I would do instead if the opportunity represented itself. What, if anything, would I do differently? And I have an idea of what I'm going to do differently. And the world and the people in it hold up those emotional hoops, and I'm off my feet and halfway through the hoop, and I don't even know I've jumped. I'm a reactor. And I don't want to be a reactor. I'm moving at this pace that's not compatible with life." And my sponsor said, "That's your problem. Because you're moving at Don's pace instead of God's pace. There's a speed to God's will, and you're not in it. The speed you're moving is much too fast. Don's will is reactive. God's will is contemplative. You don't have any room for thought. You don't have any room to really commune with God, and that's because you're working on your character defects, and it's not your job anymore." Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about character defects, and this is my experience with them. I was putting my effort in the wrong place in step 6 and 7. And I think Sheldon really did a wonderful job about talking about step 6. The whole program might be about step 6. Because if you ask somebody, what is the whole program of Alcoholics Anonymous about, if they're answering accurately, they will say, its whole intent is that you can have a conscious contact with a power greater than yourself that will solve your problem. This is a God program. Yet I'm using self-will to try to take on my character defects and confused that I'm not making any headway on them. And what I stopped doing is I stopped trying to fix myself, and I stopped putting energy in, any energy at all, on working on my character defects. And I redirected my energy into one area and one area only, working on my conscious contact with a power greater than myself. You see, I'm the guy that does prayer and meditation, and I get up so spiritual when I'm done with that, I don't even need a truck to get to work. I could float there. But there seems to be a spiritual guillotine that hangs at my front door, and as I'm going out the front door, it drops and severs my conscious contact. And I run on self-will all day, and I do what I do, and I get what I get. And then I go to the meeting at night and tell you how wonderful AA is, how much I love God. And then I sit there and reflect on my day in the 10th and the 11th step at night, and I wonder what the hell happened and where was God all day. Well, I left him at home. I left him in that room where I read that spiritual literature. I left him next to my bed where I get on my knees, but I didn't realize my life's not lived reading spiritual literature in my sunroom or on my knees next to my bed. I've never gotten in a great deal of trouble there. That's really not where I need God. I need him out there where I live my life. And I started working on that conscious contact with God. And I want to talk about spirit. You know, there's an important thing after the 3rd step in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous after Bill wrote out the 3rd step. And then he says that we should probably do this with an understanding friend, but it's better to meet God alone with someone that might misunderstand. But then he says something I think is a spiritual direction. And it's about all the prayers in the big book. And I think it applies to the 3rd step as well as the 7th step or any other prayers in the book. Bill says this: the wording was, of course, quite optional, as long as the idea was expressed without reservation. He's talking about the third step. And I think that's the same thing with the seventh step. And I'm telling you, when I simply live in the spirit of the third step and the seventh step, and what is the spirit of the third step and the seventh step? What words would I use, my own words, for the third step and the seventh step? What would it sound like? You know, Dad, I'm home. God, I've been gone a long time. I turned my back on you. And I got to tell you, if I ever needed you, I'd need you now. Because I've made a mess of my life. And I don't know what to do. And I'm offering myself to you. And you can do whatever you want with me. Because I've made a mess of it. I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's even anything worth reclaiming here. But whatever I got, you have. Good and bad. Do what you want with it. Because I'm so tired of running the show. And I've been living in that bondage of self in my mind. I just can't be free of it. I'm so tired of thinking about myself. I'm so tired of how I feel being the most important thing in the universe, and I can't seem to stop doing that. And if you took that away from me, and you gave me strength, your strength, not my strength, give me your strength, I'll go out, and not only will I serve you, I'll serve your kids. And if you did that for me, Dad, I swear I'd never take credit for it. I'd spend the rest of my life telling people what you did for me. What happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous through your love, your power, your kindness. I'll tell them what happened to me, Dad, but I need your help, and I need it today. When I have that kind of humility in my life, and I remember who I was when I got here and who I am today, then what I can do is I can go out in the world and I can live in the spirit of the third step and the seventh step. And when I'm in the spirit of the third step and the seventh step, for that moment or moments, my character defects are instantaneously removed. Now, does this mean that when I don't have a conscious contact with God, I'm automatically slammed back into communion with my character defects? No. It just means the door's open. It just means that now there's a possibility of me acting in a way that we like to call around here old behavior. And of course, we all know that if we're still participating in it, it ain't old behavior anymore. It's current behavior. But my experience has been when I am simply living my life as I think God would have me live it. I don't even know if I'm accurate. I'm just trying to live my life the way I think he would have me live it, trying to act in that manner, think in that manner, be helpful in that manner. In those moments or moment that I am truly consciously connected to my Creator with my heart and my mind attuned to the welfare of others and not self, in those beautiful, brief moments of my day, I am free, and my character defects are instantaneously removed. They cannot draw a clean breath. So for me, the object, the goal, the task of my daily living is not to improve on my character defects. It's to improve the time that I spend with God, to fill in the blanks between morning and evening prayer and meditation, the bookends of spirituality. Can I fill in those and arrive at something that we call in Alcoholics Anonymous a conscious contact? I'm awake and I'm connected with a power greater than myself. Because when you look back, at least when I look back at my history and I look at those things in sobriety that I go, God, I can't believe I did that, said that, felt that. There's always something present in that remorse, the absence of a conscious contact. And when I look at some of the things I'm the most joyous about, when I really see the gifts of my life and the things that have happened, there's always something present in that picture, in those feelings. And that's evidence of a conscious contact at that moment. So rather than work on my character defects, I remember that I'm going to ask my newfound friend to take them away, root and branch. That God's going to be the one that's going to go underneath, and he's going to get to the root of the problem. But what I know about my character defects is they will be removed by God instantaneously, but anything removed can be returned. And all I have to do, what environment do I have to create for my character defects to be returned, to come out and play, to be let off the leash, is nothing more or less than running on self-will. A friend of mine says this perfectly. I love this. He says, you know, I'll get off the beam and I'll run on self-will. The next thing I know, I'm in collision with everybody or everything. And I'm stepping on the toes of my fellows, and they're retaliating. And I think without provocation. Because I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, and I don't think so. And I'll finally slow down enough to go, what the hell's wrong with me? And